Hey everybody, Reefgrrl here. I decided to give micro bubble scrubbing one more try. The last time I tried it, which was in my 20-gallon nano, it didn't turn out as expected. I'll put a link in the description to that video if you're interested. What you see here is a Tom Aqualifter, and it's a unique little pump. It was designed for use in moving water from one place to another, pulling water from a container and pushing it into another container. Most people use it for auto top-off applications. But I learned recently that it can also be used to pull and push air. On a live stream a while ago, I heard Reefing with O talk about using a Tom's Aqualifter for bubble scrubbing, and he was pulling in fresh air from outside. And this kind of tied in with another problem I was having at the time, which was low pH overnight in my aquarium. It was dropping down into the range of 7.6869. And this was concerning me because even though I had an outside air line going to my skimmer, it didn't seem to be enough. Our houses are airtight over the winter, and a lot of CO2 tends to build up. I thought that if I could perhaps add more fresh air into my aquarium, I could maybe displace some of that CO2 and bump up the pH by a couple of points, just enough that it might make a difference. And even though it didn't go so well last time, there are people who have used it and reported significant benefits. Once I confirmed that this little pump would indeed pull and push air, I hung it across from the other one. The airline that's going to pull air into the pump is fed through the back of the cabinet through the port of a zillion wires and hoses. The airline that's attached to the wooden air stone travels across the void in the center of the sump and then into the return chamber. You can see it's that blue line right there. My return pump is the Jabo DCS 7000, and it has a basket that fits across the front to cover the intake. Underneath that basket is a gap, and as luck would have it, that gap is absolutely perfect for the air stone. It slides right in underneath. Don't mind the crud. I have cleaned that up since then. But this looks like the perfect setup. So here's where the black air hose came out of the back of the cabinet. And previously, I had eyeballed the hole in the window trim where the skimmer line came in, and I thought, yeah, there's lots of room there for two lines. And I even tried it by putting a piece of the black hose in beside the clear hose that was leading to the skimmer. But it was impossible to push those hoses through the wall and into the outside pipe. The outside pipe only went slightly into the window frame, and that left a void in the wall between the outside pipe and the inside hole, and there was nothing bridging that void, so it was impossible to push the two hoses through the hole in the window frame and get them through that void that was full of insulation and dust and drywall and wood, and get them into the pipe that led to the filter section on the outside. So any air they drew in would be drawn from the void between the inside wall and the outside wall. Unfortunately, I have no video of the struggle that followed, but I'll show you the results.
Moments later. More moments later. 20 minutes later. 3 hours later. 6.5 hours later.
Yeah, that's no exaggeration. It took many hours. We started this shortly before lunch, and it was well dark by the time we were finished. Even though my husband drilled a much larger hole through the window frame, it was still impossible to get those hoses through that void between the two walls and into the outside pipe. Just could not be done. So we came up with a different solution. We used a piece of 1/2-inch PEX pipe, which is very rigid, and passed it from the outside to the inside, going through the original hole in the window frame and ending at the hole inside. So note to self, this was a design flaw in the original installation of the skimmer line into my skimmer from outside, and if I was going to do it again, I would incorporate something like this right from the start. The other unfortunate aspect of this was that the beautifully installed pipe that my husband put on the outside that was painted and caulked had to come off in order to insert the PEX pipe inside. So that's going to have to be reinstalled once we're all done. Since this had to come off anyway, I couldn't resist the opportunity to see how dirty the filter might be. You may have seen in my video on putting the outside airline into my skimmer that I installed this filter tube to stop environmental contaminants from getting into my aquarium. And it has filter floss and carbon in it, and let's just see how dirty it is. This screen is perfectly clean. And I was very surprised at how clean this floss is. The dirtiest part was where it was right against the carbon, but the rest of it looks just fine. So I'm going to put it all back together and then we can reinstall it. The two hoses are now fished through the wall into that new PEX pipe. And it's just a matter of getting the filter pipe back on the outside, and in the spring we will recaulk and repaint it. So I think we're back in business. I turned the pump on, and after a considerable amount of fiddling around, found the perfect spot for the air stone. It's actually tucked right under that basket. And here's how it looks in the tank. I left the lights on so that we could see this. I started by bubbling after lights out, actually starting at midnight, for 15 minutes at a time for a week. And every week I've increased that time by 15 minutes. And as of now, I am up to an hour and a half of scrubbing, so pretty much from midnight till 1:30 a.m. Eventually I'll let it go for 4 hours because by then the lights will come on again. I wanted to see if it made any difference to the filter pads to have the bubble scrubbing going. So before the very first night I started it, I pulled out these filter pads because generally I swap them once a day. And here's what they looked like with no bubble scrubbing. You can see there's all kinds of uneaten food flakes there, and I'm sure other stuff that gets caught up in the overflow. So here's what they look like before. I started seeing slime immediately, but at this point there has been 1 hour's worth of bubble scrubbing every night for a week, and this is only 24 hours worth of slime, because remember, I swap these out daily. I am amazed at the amount of slime that comes out of there, so if you want proof that bubble scrubbing does pull slime out of your tank, this is it. I think the red areas might be cyanobacteria that isn't enough to be seen by the naked eye in the tank, but it's pretty obvious it's getting picked up by the bubbles and pulled out, down the overflow and into the filter pads, which is absolutely the best place for it, because now I can get it out of my tank. This really, really impresses me. There was never anything like this in the filter pads until I started the bubble scrubbing. It used to take about 3 weeks for the skimmer cup to get full enough to need cleaning. And you can see that the color of the skimmate is kind of a medium brown. It would eventually get a little bit darker, but really not that much. I wasn't unhappy with this performance, but oh my goodness, wait till you see what I have to show you next. This is after 5 days of skimming after I cleaned the collection cup. And there's so much thick foam, it's pushing out through the top of the lid. It's ridiculous. So it came from taking 3 weeks to fill up the skimmer cup to this point, and it was never this dark, to taking only 5 days to reach the point where I had to clean it because it was escaping through the top and getting blown all over the inside of my sump cabinet by my fan. The foam is just amazing. So, if a benchmark of microbubble scrubbing performance is skimmer output, this definitely meets that. I'm just blown away by this. It was something I really wasn't expecting. And nope, I did not forget about the pH. This is taken at 11 p.m., 7.84, 8384. And at this point in the night, the pH was dropping down to around 7.6869. And that's why I was so concerned. I'll take a 7.83 overnight, any day of the week. So I thought this was going to be a piece of cake because after all, I already had a hole in the wall. And I could not have been more wrong. It was a very, very stressful day, and at one point I was starting to become sure all we were doing was ruining our window. But in the end it was worth it, because the results were beyond my expectations. The slime, the skimmer performance, the bump in pH, which was one of the reasons I started, and how everything looks. The sand is cleaner. There's not as much algae that grows on the glass. The rocks are much cleaner, and in fact now when I get the turkey baster out, a lot of times there's very little detritus. So it's really obvious to me after doing this for about 5 weeks now that it does make a difference. And all of these improvements are on top of adding Miracle Mud, so I'm super pleased about that.